This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, but rocking a beautiful Toronto background behind me because, well, I consider Toronto my true home. Folks, here we are on March the 17th, 2025. 10 years I've been doing this show. And it took 10 years for me to announce that we are desperately seeking Susan. We were seeking her the other 10 years, but now we're desperately trying to find her. She's more on the watch list than where's Waldo. We don't care where Waldo is. We want to know where
hmm
Susan is. Folks,
That's funny.
yeah. Folks, desperately seeking Susan. About the year I turned 13 years old, 1985. I didn't see it then. I seen it later and truly enjoyed it. I grew up with Madonna's music, obviously. I remember when Material Girl and all those songs came out. I remember that album in particular. And of course, everything subsequent with her. And of course, I remember the beautiful Rosanna Arquette. But this year, Desperately Seeking Susan turns 40. And wow, I feel old because I'm gonna turn 53 in July, and I'm gonna tell you, my doctor spends more time talking to me than he ever has. um, but nonetheless, folks, uh, I have a guest today that was put in my zeitgeist by one Tommy Kovac of Splat from the Past, and he recommended this guy very highly, and I said, absolutely sure. He was the boutique owner in Desperately Seeking Susan. Plus, he was in a variety of other cool movies we're going to talk about. Folks, I give you Jose Angel Santana. How do you do, Jose?
Doing really good, Greg. Should I call you Greg or Python?
You can call me either one. Python's my pen name. Yeah, you can call me Python if you want to, sure.
I'll
Or
call
you
you
can come.
Python. I like that name.
I love snakes, although I don't own one,
Hmm.
but I have a kitty. I have a kitty cat, but I
As
love
do I.
snakes.
As do
Yeah,
I. Cats
yeah.
are amazing.
Cats are amazing, but they're not good at doing household chores though. Like when I get home in the morning from doing my overnight cleans, he never has the apartment cleaned.
No, they march to their own drum, right?
Well, my cat marches to his own drum only for a few seconds and plops over and goes back to sleep. Although adrenaline strikes whenever he hears that treat bag rap, then he's full of energy.
I bet. I bet. Yeah.
But anyway, uh, I am thankful to have you come on here today. I like your middle name, Angel. Are you an angel?
I like to think so, but not everybody would agree.
Would your cats agree?
My cats would agree. I'm not sure my wife would agree, but my cats would agree.
Well, wives are supposed to disagree. That's
I think
why I'm still single.
um but it was my father's name actually, and I guess they gave me the middle name, and I've had it ever since.
There you go. There you go. Well, you know what? What do you think? I mean, desperately seeking Susan, turning 40 years old. Like, I saw that email you sent me today. I guess there was a
Mhm.
screening of it, and I'm like, wow, like I said, I would have been 13 in 1985 when that came out. So it's like, wow. I'm
Yeah, that was I was, it's funny because you But I don't want to interrupt you. You were in the middle of a thought.
No, 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 you go ahead. I'm just dwelling on the fact that I feel old. I don't look anywhere near as healthy as you do.
Well, let me put it to you this way. If you were 13 when you saw it and you didn't see it when it came out, you saw it later.
No, 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 no. I was 13 the year it came out. I was 13 in 1985.
Okay, well, I was 30 when it came out.
You still look younger than me.
I don't know. I don't know. Um, but when you got in touch with me, I found it rather fascinating. Um, because the day before, either the day you got in touch with me or the day before you got in touch with me, my wife and I were talking about the 25th anniversary of Desperately Seeking Susan that occurred when I was in New York and I was working as a teacher at NYU, and I brought a couple of my students to the 25th anniversary gathering of Desperately Seeking Susan. Madonna didn't make it, but Roseanne was there, and a lot of the other cast were there as well. So it was kind of synchronistic that here we were talking about the 25th anniversary of Desperately Seeking Susan that I attended years ago in person, and like the next day or the same day, you got in touch about this 40th anniversary thing, which I didn't even realize because boy, time flies. I guess that was 15 years ago is when I brought them my two students, Paul Dalio and um, Martina, no, his wife. Anyway, um, they'll kill me if I can't believe I'm forgetting her name. But for me, it's really early in the morning, and I still haven't had my. I'm trying to have my coffee here, so my mind is escaping me. So anyway, that was like a real synchronicity. Um, you're getting in touch with me about Desperately Seeking Susan, and we were just talking about the 25th anniversary.
Well, before we dive into that in detail, I would like to get a bit of your background and how you got into the arts because you got a pretty extraordinary background in terms of, I mean, you're not just appearing in these movies, you got like a tree that's like branching out into other avenues that you're involved in with teaching and theater and I could go on and on. Uh, Talk about what got you into the arts.
That's a great question. I don't know how far you want to go back. I mean, I guess I really caught the bug when we were freshmen in high school. Um, the Some organization took the whole class to see the Broadway musical Hair, the original production of the
Yeah.
Broadway musical Hair, and it was the first Broadway play I'd ever been to, and it was right across the river from me because I lived in a town called Union City, New Jersey, right across the river from Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan. And it was like entering into another world because of the nature of the movie Hair and because of being in a Broadway, theater with a bunch of my, classmates from New Jersey. We were like freshmen in high school or something. And at the end of Hair, they invite the audience to come on stage. And the rest of my classmates were like frozen in their seats. And I just couldn't wait to get up there. And the moment I hit the stage, I felt, oh my God, I feel at home here. Like this felt like home. And I started dancing with a beautiful young lady who was in the cast. And I don't know, that would probably be the first taste I got of like this is something, this is something. I didn't know what it was, but it was something. But the rest of my high school time, I was an athlete. And in my senior year, and like being in plays and things like that was not like a popular thing to do. It was, the theater, the drama club kids were like, you know, they were nice enough, but I was an athlete, and I played football and I ran track and I played basketball, and that's what got all the attention. And I guess I'll make it pay off in a moment. But in my senior year, I'm walking down the hall, and the drama teacher yanks me into a classroom and says, "Jose, you're going to be in this play. Take this script and talk to her." And the story, and it was West Side Story. And so, he gave me the scenes between Bernardo and Anita, and I was just talking to her, and she was talking to me, and it was fun. And he says, "You're going to be Bernardo, and she's going to be Anita, and you're going to be in this play." He was like strong arming me because it wasn't my thing. Um, so I did that play, and it was so much fun. I mean, it's West Side Story, so you can imagine you can't mess West Side Story up. So it was West Side Story, and I had so much fun, and a little light went off in me. I said, "Wow, this is like really cool because you get just as much attention from the girls, and you don't got to get beat up." Because in football, which was my main sport, it was violence. Um, but this was like teamwork and working together and having fun, and it's very, I got very popular in the school. I was already popular in the school because of football. Um, but this was great. So my father, my parents came from Cuba when I was 3 years old, and immigrant parents don't come to the United States for their kids to be actors. Um, so I went to school at the University of Vermont, to as a pre-med major, but in the sophomore year, I opened up the organic chemistry book, and I thought, well, if I don't quit, if I don't quit this now, I'm going to quit it in the future, because if this is what it takes to be a doctor, I just don't, I don't want to do this. So I was really stuck because my parents, not my mother, but my father's dream was for me to, be a doctor. And I didn't want to do that. I really loved people, so I switched to mass communications because it had to do with dealing with people and so on and so forth. So I want to make this story, I want to condense the story. In my freshman year of college, I was enrolled, I was invited to audition for a play called The Covenant, which was about, it's basically like the Ten Commandments movie. It was
Hmm.
about the Israelites leaving Egypt and going across the desert. And I was cast, it was a musical, and I was cast as like the Edward G. Robinson character in the movie, who's like convinces all the Israelites to worship the calf of gold. And it made a really big impression. I mean, the play was written by a senior at the school, and it made a really big impression. And I had a ball doing it. And people were saying, "What are you doing here in college? Why aren't you in New York, being an actor?" And I didn't, it still hadn't crossed my mind because I was interested in journalism, actually. But I got all this attention, and it felt really good. And I would take a theater course every semester at the University of Vermont. But there was something about the way they taught theater that
Hmm.
they'd always raise a hand and say, "How many of you want to be professional actors?" And there was something about what theater was there, and the way it was taught and the way they did it, that just didn't appeal to me until Is this going on too long?
No, no, no. People want to hear you, not me. You keep going.
Until in my junior year, I was very serious about journalism and broadcasting, and I took a job at the Vermont State Maximum Security Prison. Um, it was called University Year for Action. I think today it's called like Job Corps or something. It's where you get full credit for a year's worth of academic studies as independent studies to go do some social service job. And in this case, the Vermont State Maximum Security Prison in Windsor, Vermont, which was like 100 miles away from the school, had a position for a producer of programmings over a two-way television network that connected um, the the prison to 5 or 6 different sites around Vermont and New Hampshire over two-way TV. So I was responsible for a year producing educational programs for the community and for the inmates via two-way TV because some inmates had skills and they would teach some these skills to the community, and the community would offer the same to the inmates. I did that for a year, and it was a maximum security prison, and I got really burnt out and really depressed by that year's worth of work. It was so rewarding. It was like amazingly rewarding. Um, in fact, during that year, it was the last year of that prison, and I made an association with Martin Sheen when he was on a tour, a college tour promoting the movie Badlands.
Okay, yeah.
And and it was the prison was being closed down because it was the oldest prison in the United States at the time. And Martin Sheen, I got Martin Sheen to narrate this documentary about the closing of the oldest prison in the United States, Windsor Prison. So I had this brush with drama, which I really enjoyed. I had this brush with Martin Sheen, and I drove him. He went to California, came back, and picked him up in Boston, and drove him back to Boston. And um, he brought he brought he brought a copy of Badlands to show to the inmates. Was I don't know if you know the movie
Oh
Badlands, but
yeah, Terrence Malick. Yeah.
exactly now it was an amazing experience to see all these moments of horrific cold-blooded murder being cheered by some of the inmates. It was really out there, and it was really out there. So I had this exposure to like show business, and I was so burnt out after working at this prison that I just took a work study over the summer at the Champlain Shakespeare Festival in Burlington, Vermont, where I got to carry spears in Broadway shows. I mean, in Shakespeare plays. But I met this group of young, um, to me, they were older, but they were, in effect, young, very ambitious, very talented actors, very serious actors that came to the Champlain Shakespeare Festival. One of them being a man named Armin Shimmerman. I don't know if you know who that is, but Armin played the Ferengi on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He was a journeyman actor at the time, but he was a serious actor and made great success, made a name for himself as on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And another wonderful actor named Jeffrey DeMunn, who's not a big
Yes.
star, but he works all the time, Jeffrey. And he stayed on to teach, and the way he taught acting was like, oh, this is different. This is different. This has to do with being truthful and being responsive to the other person, and a more of an improvisational approach to acting. Even though he was trained at the Old Vic, he had this sense of a more improvisational and a very, very grounded approach to what worked and what didn't work. So in the next semester, they did the play Crucible, and I was cast as Danforth in it. And something happened one night on stage. I mean, most of the time that I was on stage, I was so self-conscious. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I didn't know how to move. I was really self-conscious. But there was one night where I got to the theater super early and I just thought of myself as this judge with these issues on his plate and so on and so on, and had my robe on and everything. And that night when I went on stage, I wasn't like trying to, I wasn't like trying to be good or trying to be more effective or even trying to rid myself of all that self-consciousness. I just happened to go to this theater early that night and put on the robe and started thinking about the trial and these things just naturally. And that night, I went into another zone and I became the judge in that trial. And people, my fellow actors, my fellow, like in sports, they say, feed the guy who's hot. They told me after the fact that like something was like I was so on fire that they were like, feed Jose. And that's when I really caught the bug. When I really caught the bug was in that evening's performance of The Crucible in my senior year in college. I thought, now this is something that I could really enjoy doing. And right before I graduated from college, because of this job that I did at the prison, and because one of my mentors through college for the broadcasting career was a man named Daniel. Boy, my mind is, I'm losing names of people that are really important in my life. Um, it'll come to me. Anyway, he was the president of Capital Cities Broadcasting Company. And he was a mentor of mine who basically offered me an entree into the broadcasting industry. And, I had good grades in college, and I could have gone to law school like every other Cuban kid that either becomes, a lawyer or an accountant. But I just thought, there's this thing. What I seem to enjoy the most and what I seem to get the most positive reinforcement for is um is acting. So with about a month before I left college, I was really torn because nobody in the theater department or in the communications department thought it was a good idea for me to pursue an acting career because, you know, Ed Feidner, the head of the theater department, said, a lot of people have come through here as drama students, and I don't know of a single one. Now he'd been there for like 35, 40 years. I don't know of a single one who's made a living as an actor. And this was like the beginning, the start of like affirmative action in the United States. So there were opportunities for someone, today it's called what is it called? DIE or something. There was just an affirmative action push that there would have been opportunities for me to go to law school, for me to, start out in broadcasting for all those reasons. But I just thought I got to figure out if this is something I want to do. So I went to a guidance counselor. The only time I went to a guidance counselor in all my time at the University of Vermont, and I told him about my dilemma
Mhm.
that I had these opportunities, especially because of this thing that I did at the prison. It was kind of a big deal. Um, and I told him my dilemma, the same dilemma I just said to you. And he didn't say much, but he said to me, "Do you have a dream?" And I got real quiet. And he noticed that I got real quiet. He said, "You don't have to tell me what the dream is, but what I would say is take the path that leads to your dream. Because even if you never reach your dream, you'll be someplace you want to be." And that's up there with the top one or two things that anyone's ever said to me in my life. And that's something that what I've mentored young people for a long time now. Um, that's something that I never fail to say to young people because it's been true. When you introduced me, yeah, my life has taken a lot of different directions, and it's because I've never lost that dream, and I've always, no matter what successes or failures that I've had in my life, I've always stayed on the path that leads to my dream. um, so one night I was with my girlfriend, um, about a month, it was right after Larry Simmons was the counselor, um, who said that to me. Um, Never forget his name. I called up. Do you know who Robert Brustein is?
No, I don't think so. I thought maybe I might have heard that name, but
You
no, I
probably
don't
have
think so.
heard that name. You probably have. He's a legendary dean of the Yale Drama School, and then eventually he went to the Harvard, and he was like the grand master of actor theater training in the United States for many years. Robert Brustein. I didn't know who he was. I just thought that Yale was like the best school to go to. So I called him up at 6 o'clock at night, like dinner time. I called this guy. I found out through the Yale directory or something who Robert Bruce, his phone number. I got his phone number. I called him up and I said, Mr. Brustein, my name is Jose Angel Santana. I'd really like to become an actor. And I wonder if you can, give me a few minutes of your time. And he said, well, I am about to sit down for dinner with my family. I said, oh, I'm very sorry. And then I realized, and then I found out who he was. I didn't know who he was. I mean, I knew his name. I knew he was the head of Yale, but I didn't know, he was this like giant of in his field. I just thought he was the dean of the Yale Drama School. Anyway, that didn't go well. I asked a friend about who was at Juilliard, who was in that play, The Covenant, that I was in my freshman year. And he said, "Al, you don't want to come to Juilliard. This place is, I'm leaving myself." For some reason, he didn't like it there and he didn't think it was a good place for me to go. And then there was a student that I saw at the University of Vermont in Faust, Dr. Faustus, who was remarkable. He was so real. And I said, where is he? So his name was Michael Levine. And I found out that he was going to the neighborhood playhouse in New York. And I called him up. I got his phone number and I called him up. And he remembered me from Covenant. And he said that he'd get me an interview for the neighborhood playhouse. And I went and I interviewed with the neighborhood playhouse. Sanford Meisner was not um, there. He was on sick leave from the school. So I was interviewed by Paul Morrison, the assistant, administrator of the school. And it wasn't an audition, it was an interview. And I said, there's other things that I could be doing, but if I don't do this, I won't, I'll always be looking back. So I need to at least find out if this is something that I want to do. And they admitted me into the school. Now, I'll leave it up to you if you want to ask me anything about the neighborhood playhouse, but studying with Sanford Meisner, because he did come back and he was my teacher. Um, but all I could say is that, when I entered the neighborhood playhouse in 1976, I knew next to nothing about the craft of acting. But when I left the neighborhood playhouse in 1978, I almost immediately found myself, you know, at in the center and at of the highest level of the entertainment industry, because not soon thereafter, um, I have so many anecdotes about how all this crazy stuff happened. David Mamet was an amazing influence on my career and my professional life, because he was my mentor for the first like 7 years of my career and gave me tremendous opportunities. So why don't I pause there? Because after, once I started working with David in the earliest years of my after the Playhouse, all kinds of doors opened for me. When I first got out of the Playhouse, I would make the rounds to agents, and they really didn't have anything for me. They would say, I already have one like you. And then when David came to see me in an off Broadway play of Rebel Without a Cause, that I played the Salminio role in that, um, he came to see it and wrote me a nice letter after seeing it and invited me to a workshop of a play that the director Ulu Grossbard was directing at the New York Shakespeare Festival, the Public Theater. Um, I met the people at the New York Shakespeare Festival, the Public Theater, which, was the biggest thing in New York for a long time. And that led me to not only work on a production of Mammoths at the Public Theater called The Blue Hour, but then it led me to do Shakespeare in the Park in Coriolanus. Um, and the rest is is another saga that I'm going to pause here, Mr. Python, to have you chime in and save me from myself.
Actually, you know what? I always have a rule. I say the audience wants to hear from my guests more than me. So this is all very interesting. So there's not any of this I would cut out. This was great, you know. But I do have a few of your films I do want to ask about, though, because obviously your background led to some incredible films. And of course, Desperately Seeking Susan, of course, is high on that list. It's celebrating 40th anniversary. And yeah, I should because my friend Lisa Langlois, class of 1984, invited me to my first convention because I lived here in New Brunswick my whole life. And in 2017, she invited me to my first convention. It was a horror film convention. And she and I have become very good friends. And since 2017, I've been doing the convention circuit. And she helped me get my passport. So I made my first trip to the US last April. And I met Rosanna Arquette. I think I'll show the nice picture I have of her. I had a hard time figuring out what I was going to get signed because Rosanna was in so many great movies. I went with her other big film of 1985, After Hours. I got that
Oh,
signed.
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And she still looks stunning. I always thought that Rosanna Arquette was beautiful, you know? But I mean, between that and Pulp Fiction, Desperately Seeking Susan, the list goes on with her, you know, the stuff she's done. I think After
She's
Hours is
even
a
had
very,
she's even had, I think, two different top musicians write songs about her.
yeah, Toto.
Um, and
Who
Peter
was the other
Gabriel,
one?
exactly.
Who was the other one
Peter
that done it?
Gabriel, Peter Gabriel also wrote one about, I forget what the name. Anyway, there's two of them.
Okay, I did not know
So
that.
you were saying,
Yeah, so I met her. I gave her my card and stuff, you know, and I was happy to meet her. She was one of the prime people I wanted to meet, but that was my first time in the States. And I went to New Jersey Chiller I guess it was Rosanna's first US convention appearance. So I'm hoping to
wow,
meet her again because I'm like, yeah, I could venture into some of these other pictures on her table, you know. I spent a lot of money
mhm,
at that con, I gotta tell you. Um,
wow,
so it's a good thing I got two jobs. But yeah, I met Rosanna at that convention. She still looks beautiful, you know. But Yeah, Desperately Seeking Susan. Nice slice of 80s life. And of course, this was just after Madonna really skyrocketed with the Like a Virgin and Material Girl album. I remember when that burst onto the scene, you know, and she has still managed to reinvent herself and stay with zeitgeist, you know, and some people like some of her films, some people don't. I find she's gotten praise for stuff like Evita and this, you know, and I really
Well,
liked her.
I have a couple of I have a couple of stories for you about Desperately Seeking Susan and Madonna if you want to
Yeah,
know.
please.
Um, Desperately Seeking Susan, let me cut to the chase. Madonna, they had cast most of the movie before casting Madonna. They were looking for Susan role for quite some time and they were having trouble. And her original album, the first album, I don't know what the name of it was, that had the song I think maybe the album may have been called Holiday. I'm not sure. Had the song Holiday on it, Holiday. Anyway, because of that album that was just getting really hot, it was really danceable album. They brought Madonna in and considered her for the part, and that's how she was cast because she was this like East Village punky musician, and the movie takes place. The inciting incidents of the movie take place in the East Village, the whole downtown New York scene. Um, and so, since she was an unknown at the time for the to the movie audience, um, her and I shot my scenes in the first um 3 days of the movie, and her and I shared a trailer, a Winnebago. I was on one side of the Winnebago, she was on the other side of the Winnebago, and she had music going on all the time, and the Winnebago was rocking back and forth all the time. So people wondered what was going on in there. There was nothing going on in there. I was just dancing on my side, and she was dancing on hers. But she was a absolutely, totally down to earth person, and I had just come back from um, working for a couple of weeks on television show that was hugely popular back then called Miami Vice. And I fell in love with the island community. It was in the Caribbean. It was just St. Croix in the Virgin Islands was just right next to Puerto Rico. And when I went in those waters, it was like I felt like I was in the waters of Cuba again in the Caribbean. And I had this yearning. Well, I'll tell you what her and I sat on the floor one day and she said, "Well, Jose, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do in the business?" I said, "Actually, I want to leave the business and go to St. Croix and start a theater for children in the Virgin Islands on St. Croix in the Virgin Islands." She said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, you should do that." And I said, "What do you want to do?" And now this is no joke. This is what she said on the set of on the first day or two of her first movie. When I asked her the same question she asked me, she said, "I want to rule the world."
There's something
And
about
I
that that
thought,
kind of rings true.
I want to rule the world. And I thought, this is like the difference between someone who's destined to be a global superstar and a working actor. I thought, don't you realize that, we're going to do this job, it's going to be over, then we're going to be unemployed, and we're going to go around trying to find another acting job. That's what my life became. But she literally, um, well, it didn't actually become that. I kept on my path to my dream, and that led me to working with young people. But she I don't need to even finish the sentence. We all know
Yeah, we
what
don't know where
became of
she
Madonna.
went.
Exactly, exactly. But
Madonna
she
has
in
continued to transform. Like I have, I remember when Material Girl, Like a Virgin, and I remember those videos, when they came out. I remember. And then, you got her, oh my goodness, she's still churning out music. And well, a person has said to me, I've heard it more than once, she continues to reinvent herself. And that is why she's one of the 80s pop stars that's still relevant today. Um, but yeah, I have a lot of respect for her as a musician, and I liked her in movies like Desperately Seeking Susan, Evita, League of Their Own, and movies like that. A lot of people have criticized her as an actress, but you know what? Um, to do both can be a challenge. Some people have been able to do it, but I can always cite to Madonna when she's done great at it. You know, Evita, she was perfect. They had her voice. There was no criticism of her performance, but she had this happy, playful, carefree kind of disposition in Desperately Seeking Susan, and she
did.
fit right in with it. I really liked her in that. So, but I'll always love her as a musician. And as far as acting goes, like I said, I can't act at all. So I'll give her props on that. So um, I could probably find more Madonna movies that I like, that just aren't coming right to mind. But Desperately Seeking Susan, she and Rosanna were great together, and so I have a lot of respect for what she has done with herself and continues to reinvent herself. That would be the word I would use to describe her, reinvent. You know,
Oh,
um,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah. So, much love and respect for Madonna.
Yeah, she would have those 3 days that I was on the set at the stroke of like 6 o'clock when the day was over, she'd have a limousine and a script that I guess her manager set up for her to go to a meeting with some other for some other gig. Her ambition and her focus is was formidable. And we stayed in touch for a while after the movie, and she but that's a trait that I was fortunate enough to have an inside um look at um some very, very successful people um early in their careers, and that's a trait that they all have in common, which is this laser obsessive focus on becoming not just successful but known. I mean, I was, and I know he's a very notorious figure these days, but I was friends and coworkers with Kevin Spacey
You know
when we
what?
were both.
I'm still a Kevin Spacey fan. I know he's come under fire,
Mhm.
but I have a lot of his movies here on Blu-rays.
Yeah, he's a marvelous actor, and
Mhm.
and he had that ambition thing too. He was just so focused on his vision for his future, just like Madonna. Um,
Can I ask you just
yeah,
off the top, what's your favorite Kevin Spacey performance? For me, I love American Beauty. I saw that 4 times in the theater. And I also think the Men Who Stare at Goats, very underrated movie, where he was in it with Ewan McGregor, Jeff Bridges, and George Clooney. I mean, that movie deserves more love, but
I have to
I
see that.
really
I
like
haven't seen
American.
it.
Oh, check it out. Check it out. It's funny, you know. But I liked American Beauty a lot, where he played Lester. And I can't think of a single person who can't relate to him telling off his boss. in that movie. It's like we've all been there, Um, some people, and I've heard this about Woody Allen, I've heard this about Roman Polanski and various, some people, they can't watch their movies anymore. I've never, I can always separate it, you know, because I know what Spacey's been accused of and this and that, but I'm kind of like, he's so mesmerizing, he's so commanding, and he's the big reason I went to American Beauty 4 times. It's like
Wow.
I
Wow.
know what I know what Lester Burnham was like. This and this whole idea of him. He was in this office job, but really fantasized about flipping burgers again. He's saying, "Yeah, it was the best times of my life. I was able to buy first album or whatever, and I'm like, wow, this movie's really, really layered. I have one of the dancers from American Beauty on the show here. When he's at the gym, you got Mina Savari and they got the girls doing the cheerleader dance. I have one of the choreographer dancers on the show and talked about that. So I'm not condoning what anybody does. Um, we all got our skeletons, but uh, Kevin Spacey, like even in something as recent as Baby Driver, Kevin's always been just lands everything he does. I don't think I've ever seen him give a bad performance. So yeah,
Hmm. No, he's very complicated individual. Without question, an
you have a
extraordinary
favorite of his
actor.
song? You have his favorite of his
Excuse me?
movie? What's your favorite for Kevin Spacey?
You know, I can't get if you ask me that question, I can't. And in American Beauty, he was he's very good, obviously. But for some reason, I can't get Usual Suspects out of my mind.
Oh yeah.
Um, because that was very close to when we worked together previously to that,
Hmm.
um, and there was something very, very quirky, and it wasn't just his performance. It was about the whole movie that was so entertaining and quirky that I can't. That was the first one that comes to mind. The other thing too, and this goes for a lot of people. This I don't know how other people are, but it's very difficult. I know when I was coming up as an actor in New York and doing a lot of theater in New York, and my friends or my parents would come and see me, I'd ask them, so what did you think? And they'd say to me, well, what do you mean? I'd say, well, how was I? And they'd say to me, well, you were just yourself. You were just like, they couldn't evaluate me because they knew me so well. So with people that I've worked with and knew well and know well in the business, I can't, it's really hard for me to evaluate. I think the reason that Usual Suspects sticks in my mind is because of the trickery of that movie. And I don't know if it's true or not, that when they were filming it, that none of the actors knew who Kaiser Soze was. So that adds a layer of question. I don't, everybody was so good, but the trick that the director didn't let them know who Kaiser Soze was so that any one of them could be was pretty amazing. But yeah, I have a trouble. If you ask me that question about
Hmm.
just about anybody that I've worked with before, it's hard because I'm seeing them and I
Yeah.
know them,
Hmm.
and but there's exceptions. I mean, I worked with Al Pacino for a year off Broadway, but I'm always mesmerized with Al's work. Um, and I know Jane Fonda fairly well,
I love
and I'm
Jane
always
Fonda.
I'm always taken aback by what she does. But it's the kids that were, like William H. Macy and I, started out together in New York, although he's a little older than me, because of the Mamet Association. And whenever I see Billy, I see him. Except he did do a thing. I think I think it's something called My Name is Bill, where he plays this very unusual person, and I thought that that was pretty remarkable. Hey, while we're at it, let me ask you something. Since you're from Canada, does the name Wendell Meldrum mean anything to you?
I don't think so.
She's an actress. She passed away. She was a very dear friend of mine. Was in that production of Rebel Without a Cause that I talked about. But she won some kind of like the Canadian version of an Emmy Award for a television series that she did. After this interview, I'll send you some information about Wendell, who was a very, very fine actress and good friend. How about the name Des McAnuff? Does that name mean anything to you?
That sounds familiar.
He's a director who has worked a lot at Banff and um is a very big time. He directed Tommy on Broadway and he directed Jersey Boys on Broadway, and he's from Canada. I'm just throwing out names because I'm always
Mhm.
trying to make the world a little smaller, of people who know each other or know of each other in common. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. Python, I'm going to turn it back over to you. This is your interview.
Oh, we love hearing from you. Never, ever, ever turn yourself down. We're here to see you, and I find this very fascinating. This is so much beyond my expectations. So this is fantastic. I want to ask you about Rosanna Arquette. What was she like?
Rosanna was um I had a little bit of history with Rosanna because I moved to California in 85 to work with a man named Paul Sills, who started Second City in Chicago back in the 50s. The first, you know, the in, the original Saturday Night Live sketch comedy improvisational theater. His mother, Viola Spolin, wrote a groundbreaking book called Improvisation in the Theater. And Paul Sills was a great director and theater maker in his own right. And I went there in 85 to um, to learn the skills that I wanted to use to work with kids starting a theater and teaching kids in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. The reason I'm telling you that story is that Roseanne's father um, was a member of Paul Sills's company. It was called Sills and Company. On Friday and Saturday every week, they would put on an improvisation show with people like Peter Boyle, Robin Williams, giants of the world of improvisation. A wonderful improviser named Severin Darden. Just really, really amazing. And he, uh, Paul embraced me into the company and was like apprenticing me in um, to it. And so I knew Rosanna and her sister actually. Um, what's her sister's name? She's a big actress.
Patricia Arquette.
Patricia. See, I'm like losing it, man. I'm on spring break from my teaching job at USC. So like I'm so fried from teaching that I have so many names to remember
At
from
least you
teaching. I don't
had a
remember.
spring break.
Yeah, at least I have a spring break. You're right. At least I have a spring break. So my point is that I had a little bit of history with Rosanna as a young person before meeting her on the set of Desperately Seeking Susan formally. I didn't know her well around her father, Louis Arquette, but she was I found her to be extremely pleasant, extremely professional. Remember, it was the first 3 days of that movie, I only worked on it for 3 days. And on the first 3 days of a movie, things are a little bit, everybody's trying to feel each other out. And there was a thing going on in that movie where, if you remember the movie, she falls down and hits her head and then wakes up and doesn't remember
Yeah.
who she is. At the start of that movie, there was a question between her and the director as to whether she actually had amnesia or she was faking amnesia. And that made her a little bit uncomfortable. So she was a little bit reserved when we worked together because, you know, you prepare for months to be in this independent, wonderfully scripted movie with a really great cast. Um, and that question, I think, was messing with her head a little bit. So she was a little bit in her own world trying to figure out how to go about these scenes. Although the scenes with me all took place before she hit her head. So she was pretty straight ahead. But, we were pretty professional because other than the times that I was, in the trailer with Madonna, when we were on set, everybody was pretty locked into what they had to do in their scenes. So there wasn't a lot of socializing other than staying in one's own thing. And I was very much staying in my own thing because of the way I chose to play my part. Although Madonna was a piece of work. So let me stay on Rosanna Arquette. It was 25 years later when we went to that reunion that she was absolutely loose and lovely, and we just hung out and enjoyed our time together, just like the way we are right now. I mean, she's just
Hmm.
perfectly congenial and pleasant.
Well, speaking of desperately
She
seek,
was just like you. She was just like you, Python. A lovely person.
oh, she's a lot lovelier than me. I know. I looked good with her beside me in our photo together.
Hmm.
Yeah, she beautified the picture because
Well, she's a
she,
gorgeous woman.
yeah. It was awesome to meet her, though. I gotta say, and I hope to receive the opportunity to do so again. I was gonna say, speaking of desperately seeking Susan, how about the Susan that I hope you guys didn't have to seek because she had to be in the director's chair, Susan
Susan
Seidelman.
Seidelman. Susan
Hope you guys
Seidelman.
weren't seeking her because she had to be.
Susan Seidelman was lovely. She did an amazing job of directing all the scenes that I was in. I mean, she was. I wish all directors were like her. She was as good as, well, no one's as good as Sidney Lumet, but she was up there with Sidney Lumet in just being confident about who she cast in the roles and leaving them alone to do their work and without micromanaging them. That's one of the signs of a really wonderful director is that they kind of trust who they cast to do the job and kind of stay out of their way unless they're going in the wrong direction. And if they are going in the wrong direction, they gently steer them in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? You have some other films I got to bring up as well.
Hmm.
One is Nighthawks, of course, with Sylvester Stallone and
Yes.
Rutger Hauer, who we sadly lost way too soon, I think. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, talk about working on Nighthawks.
Well, again, interestingly, again, I worked on Nighthawks in the very first days of production. I had a very small role. I was actually cast in Prince of the City first,
Mhm.
which is a whole story. Which if you want to hear, I'll tell you that story. But
Sure.
Nighthawks, I was cast in Prince of the City, waiting to do Prince of the City, and then I was cast in Nighthawks, Um, and I had a very small role. I played like many up and coming actors. I played a mugger. I was supposed to mug the character that Sylvester Stallone played, and then I was apprehended by Billy D. Williams. So acting wise, it was it was very I don't know if it was unglamorous. It was exciting to work with Sylvester Stallone and work with Billy D. Williams, even though I was in that kind of a role. But the most exciting and the most interesting part of Nighthawks was, again, the first 2 or 3 days of the production, sharing a trailer with someone who, talk about dying too young, the most legendary stunt coordinator up until he passed away, a man named Dar Robinson, who was, did a stunt off of the Seattle Needle falling down. I forget what movie it was, and just a legendary stunt coordinator, Dar Robinson. So I shared a trailer with Dar Robinson, myself, and Sylvester Stallone's bodyguard. And one of the most fascinating things about that was listening to Dar Robinson talk about the dangers and the preparation for doing his stunts, and Sylvester Stallone's bodyguard, Little Tony, talking about all of the machinations of guarding Sylvester Stallone and major dust ups that have occurred. And they were trading war stories about all these kinds of things. So, um, those are my stories, and they're not very, I don't know, they're not very glorious. See, some of the best stories about working on movies is what happens, either what happens when you're shooting it or what happens hanging out with the people
Hmm.
when you're not shooting it.
Talk about Prince in the City.
Huh?
Talk about Prince in the City.
Oh, Prince of the City was, that was really exciting
Hmm.
because, um I'll start with the shooting of it. Working with Sidney Lumet for an actor's like dying and going to heaven because he's he knows the material thoroughly, and he rehearses with the actors before making the movie. And although I didn't rehearse for my scenes, um, we had a read through of it on the first day of production. We read through the entire script, 143 speaking roles, and he just basically, it was because I teach directors now how to work with actors.
Hmm.
Um, and he was a master class. I don't steal. I borrow from everything that Sidney Lumet did, which was, after the read through, he basically spoke about his personal connection to the material in a very vulnerable way, which kind of opened the door for all of us to be vulnerable. And he said that the movie was really, uh, it was a movie about everybody sitting on a ticking time bomb as a theme, as an approach to doing it. And, I was in a very, very critical scene in the movie. And, but only one of every role in that movie was kind of critical. Um, and he had the depth of insight to say to me from across the room, he said, and the junkies, they have no power. They could only ask. Now, I don't know how interested you or your viewers are in the craft of acting or the performance, but I got to say that when he said that the junkies have no power, they can only ask, he basically gave me the spine of my whole character, you know. He basically confined my choices to some version of asking, begging, appealing, requesting. And when you have that kind of a armature around you to play the role, you really can't do any wrong because you don't have to guess, well, how am I going to play this part? I knew how I was going to play the part from the very first day of rehearsal is that I had no power. I can only ask for these drugs, you know, and that makes just the act of asking makes you vulnerable. So he was amazing. And on the set, once again, he basically, we shot it out of sequence. He basically left me alone to really get into the emotional life and the meaning of that role to me. And I just, because one of my teachers besides Sanford Meisner was Stella Adler, she helped me to, she, not personally, I mean, I took her class, a script interpretation class with many other actors in New York at the time, but I came to understand how to analyze a script so that I could express what, you know, the intention of the director and the author was. So I just interpreted the role that because someone in the movie, actually it was the Treat Williams character, Danny Cello says, you know, it's the junkies that break your heart because he used to, you know, in the movie he would give drugs to um the street junkies for information to you know, as an exchange for information. That line, the junkies break your heart, gave me the impetus to interpret my role in the movie as had to be heartbreaking. So when I brought that, it was totally in alignment with what Sidney thought, and he would just guided me to the most important thing I could say about Sidney Lumet is that making a movie, and especially a movie as complicated as Prince of the City, has all these technical dimensions to it. When you work with Sidney Lumet, you feel like you are the most important thing in the world. So instead of paying attention, I mean, he worked out all the cinematography elements of it and the production design elements of it ahead of time so that on set, he just paid attention to you and supported whatever you wanted to do as long as it served the movie. And what I was doing, I guess, served the movie. So he left me alone to do that. Um, and I worked, that was the most important role I did in a movie of his, but I worked in smaller roles in two other movies of his. And it's always the same thing. He just leaves you alone to, you know, he casts very carefully and he just trusts that you know what you're doing and he leaves you alone. And that's how it is. You know, I have a special place for him because he cast me in my first movie in a wonderful role, but he's known for never writing letters of recommendation or anything. But when I was applying for my job at NYU, he wrote me a wonderful letter of recommendation. Um, so I have a deep debt of gratitude to him on both levels, as both casting me in that great role and then supporting me in my first well, it's actually the second time I've taught at NYU. My first time was actually with Mamet, but in the graduate film school, he wrote me a letter of recommendation. I don't know.
Excellent.
I always get into minutia, Python. So I'm sorry.
No, 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 no. Don't apologize. Don't apologize. Look, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. If I'm talking more than you, there's something wrong. So trust me, I definitely got some questions to ask, but no, you keep going. I wanted to ask you about the Pope of Greenwich Village because I've never met Eric Roberts, but we both appear in a movie together.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Well, James Balsamo, um, I've had on the show here a number of times. He goes around to the cons and he does these really low independent films, and he'll get people to appear in them. and he got Eric Roberts to be a central character in his movie It Wants Blood. And he asked me if I would shoot a scene where he told me what he wanted me to do. He told me to shoot it on my camera and send it to him on my phone, send it to him. So I did. And it's going to be watched on television by Eric Roberts. So I'm like, oh, I'm game, sure. I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? I'm not much of an actor, but I mean, look, who cares? I'm gonna be watched by Eric Roberts. I'll take it, you know. So,
Mm.
so anyway, you worked with Eric Roberts and Mickey Rourke and Daryl Hannah in that movie. Talk about that experience.
Um, again, I worked very early in the production
Hmm.
of that movie, and it was a day player role. Um, I was a waiter in a restaurant that the two brothers, I think they were brothers in the movie, Eric Roberts and Mickey Rourke played. Um, and That was an interesting experience because I was just learning, how to work in movies and stuff. So I learned a lot from watching these two leads. And Eric, since you're asking about Eric Roberts, that's a great question because he was like at the height of his acting career at the time. And what was unusual and a little bit difficult to deal with is that his role in the Pope of Greenwich Village was of a guy who was basically a psychopath. And he was always in character. Like on set, for the couple of days that I worked on that, he was like always in character and he behaved somewhat like a psychopath. And I didn't like him very much. I didn't like him. I mean, I took it. He wasn't. He. There was nothing like directed at me that, in particular, that was off-putting. But the way he handled himself with everybody was somewhat off-putting to me. And the reason I'm telling this story, if it ended there, I would probably wouldn't tell the story. But what was really interesting is that, after each movie production, there's a wrap party where the whole cast and crew gets together and celebrates the completion of the film. And I found myself at the bar with Eric, and he was the loveliest guy. He was like a different person. It was really weird. It was really, really weird, And then I said, "Oh, the light kind of went off. Oh, that's what that was." That he was always Paulie. He was like in Paulie world the whole time. The couple of days that I worked on it, he was always this really psychopathic character, and he wasn't speaking well to people and stuff. Again, it wasn't directed at me, but I saw the way he handled himself with everybody, and he just was like really crass. But that's the way the character was in the movie. And so when we met at the bar at the end, I was I was stunned because I was preparing to like, if this guy messes with me, like I'm not going to take it. But there was nothing, there was not even a grain of Paulie in the way he was after the movie wrapped, and he was just a really pleasant guy.
I
So
can't
that was
wait
my
to.
experience about. So I was very impressed. I was very impressed with his acting because he was the guy all the time. Well, listen, when I did Prince of the City, I was the guy all the time too. When I was
Mhm.
working on Desperately Seeking Susan, I was the guy all the time too. That's why I said that if I didn't spend a lot of time with these people, you know, off of the set, I didn't necessarily know them very well because I was very much zoned into what my job was. So somebody might have said about me on Desperately Seeking Susan, what the hell's wrong with this guy? He's just so like not there. Like, um, so that's my experience with Eric Roberts. He was in character, really killing it in the role, but very different when I met him at the rap party. Very pleasant guy.
What about Mickey Rourke?
Mickey Rourke's a funny guy. He was very relaxed, very pleasant. Um, and we had a mutual friend, um, one of my dear friends, Bill Riley, who is deceased, was a very good friend of Mickey's, and they acted in a movie together before when Mickey was just coming up. And he was pleasant. He was pleasant. I touched base with him about Bill, and he appreciated that. But it's it's really hard to know unless you work with an actor every day on a set. It's hard to get a really good sense of them because they're really there to do their job. And I always respect that. And he was pleasant to touch base with, but I didn't get to know him very well. The only other thing about Mickey Rourke is that I've run into him a few other times, and whenever I remind him of any of what I just told you, it's always as if I'm meeting him for the first time. It's really strange. It's really strange. I mean, but then again, Mickey Rourke, as everyone knows, is has become quite the individual, quite the
Hmm.
unique character in his own right. So I'm not sure
Hmm.
he remembers his past lives actually.
No. Okay, Garbo talks.
Oh, that was just a bone that Sidney Lumet threw my way because they needed to shoot a scene in a hospital. And they needed some hospital workers to attend to, I forget which character I was attending to. And Sidney was just both that movie and The Morning After, both directed by Sidney. He just I never My agent never submitted me for them. The casting director didn't contact me. I was contacted by Sydney's office directly if I wanted to be in these movies because we'd worked together before in Prince of the City. And it was both times in Garbo Talks and in The Morning After, I was just felt honored and happy to be asked by Sydney to play roles that were not challenging in any way. Um, Day player roles that was part of a Sidney Lumet movie.
And of
I
course,
felt honored.
in the morning after, you worked with Jane Fonda, who I've always
Yeah.
loved Jane Fonda, and I'm glad that she kind of came back, when she was in Monster in Law, and then she made this comeback. And it was nice to see her come back. I've always loved Jane. And obviously you've got a good working relationship with her. Talk about that.
Well, that's a great story. I'm so happy, man. You've done your homework, and I appreciate it because and the way we're talking about these things because this is like I hope you send me a copy of this
I
because
will.
you're capturing things that are really valuable to me. If you recall, I said that I moved to California in 1985 to work with Paul Sills to learn skills that I wanted to use working with young people. Because the
Hmm.
training that I got at the neighborhood playhouse was for the professional theater and film industry. It was no nonsense. It was like, you had a role and it was your job to deliver. And that's what I was trained to do at the Playhouse. It did not lend itself well to doing theater with young people on this tropical island. And the reason that I fell into that, and this has to do with the Jane Fonda story, is that when I was shooting Miami Vice there,
Mhm.
during the day, there were these young people. This was when the Thriller, Michael Jackson's Thriller
I
album came out in the early,
remember when that came out. I remember it like it
right?
was yesterday. Yeah.
Right. So when that album came out on the set of Miami Vice, which was exploding in popularity, there were all these young people from the island always on the set. And what they would be doing is like entertaining us. They would be singing, they'd be dancing, they'd be moonwalk, they would be doing all these things, you know? And I would look over to them and go, wow, you know. And then I'd look at our operation, and everybody on in our operation was seemed miserable. And everybody who was these kids that were watching us looked like joyful. And I go, what's wrong with this picture? I signed up for this acting thing to do that, not to be, be surrounded by all these, like Don Johnson, who was about to become a superstar, was like always miserable. Like we had to walk a block or two to do our shot. And he was complaining, like, why don't they bring a cart over here and get us over there? And I'm thinking, man, I'm getting paid bank to do this. You must be getting paid like 10 times what I'm getting paid. You're complaining about having to walk a couple of blocks to to do a movie in paradise, to do television show in paradise. Come on. So that contrast kind of sunk in with me, combined with when I went in the water, it was the Caribbean where I was born, and these kids. So every day we shot, these kids would be on set having a joyful time. But in the evenings, when I um, walked through Christiansted, that was the town in St. Croix that we stayed and shot in, these same kids were like selling dope, taking dope, selling their bodies, just totally self-destructing, these same exact kids. And I'd come home to the hotel at night and I'd talk about this with the John, the night clerk at the inn that we stayed at. And the night before I left, he said, well, Jose, if you really care about this stuff, if someone like you stayed here and actually did something about it, things might change. But, you'll probably go off and have a successful career in show business. And I'm the wrong person to say that to because I'm so suggestible. So when I got back to the States, I did Desperately Seeking Susan. And that's why when Madonna asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go back to St. Croix to work with kids. Um, so I followed through on that and I came to California to learn different skills so that I can um, work with kids, skills that I saw behind the scenes when I was doing Mammoth play called Edmund in Chicago. And one of the cast members used to be a member of Second City. And he took me to see the show and he took me backstage to see how they created these shows out of nothing, it seemingly, but they had a system. And it was a system that I wanted to learn so that I can work with kids. So I came to California, was working with Paul Sills. I formed a little acting troupe called The Few, where we worked on the combination of Sandy Meisner's work and Paul Sills, Viola Spolin, and Paul Sills' work every morning from 9 till noon. And I had this agenda where I wanted to recruit people from show business. This is crazy to leave their careers and like go help kids in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Like when I first moved out to California, my agent said, Jose, you've been like really quiet out there. This isn't like you. You're usually really busy. I said, well, I've been working on, working with Paul Sills, and I got this little group of actors. And when he said, you should probably check into, the Gersh agency out in California, because I was with the Gersh agency in New York, the big agency. I said, okay, so when I met with the whole staff, they wanted to know who I was because they didn't know me. I was there for like 6 months. They said, so Jose, what do you want? Like a good agent, they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to learn these skills so I can go to the Virgin Islands to work with kids. Now they took it well. They didn't do eye rolls, or they didn't like give up on me immediately. They took it in. And then they sent me out on jobs, and I got jobs. But um the thing with the morning after came at the end of the first year of being out there, and I had really hunkered down with these um these fellow actors who were working out every morning. And I said to them, our problem isn't going to be getting work out here. Our problem is going to be staying together because we're going to get work, because we were very dedicated to our craft. And so when I got the call from Sydney to be in the morning after, the big part of that gig was that when I went to his office to meet him for the job, he wanted to make sure I knew how to drive because I played a cab driver. And I hadn't driven in a while. I was driving around LA in a motorcycle, but he grilled me like, so Jose, you really, can you drive? I said, yeah, of course, Sydney. Of course I can drive. So I was kind of bluffing because I hadn't driven a lot lately. But he cast me. And on the set, um, Jane, in between shots, she asked me, so Jose, you're a New York actor. What are you doing out here? And I told her the story that I just told you about the kids on St. Croix wanting to learn a way to work with them. And that's why I came to California to work with Paul Sills. And she said, well, I have this ranch in Santa Barbara that in the summertime I turn it into a performing arts camp for underprivileged kids and the children of, like, the wealthy. They all come together and they make theater, they make music, they make photography, they make art all summer. Why don't you come up there and be the drama director? I said, Jane, I've never did this before. I said, I came out here to learn how to do this. She said, well, go up there and learn. I said, really? She says, yeah, Jose, come on, do this.
Remarkable.
It's totally remarkable. And within a week of shooting it, she invited me to her home for a get together, a kind of, I guess it was turned out to like a campaign thing for Gary Hart, who was running for president at that time, was gearing up to run for president of the United States. About 2 weeks after that, he got exposed of having an affair with somebody, and his campaign imploded. But anyway, she invited me to her house, and Carole King is at the piano playing, one of her hit songs, and all these luminaries, and meet the next president of the United States, Gary Hart. And I am, you know, hanging out with Jane Fonda after a year being in Los Angeles, really going there to learn to work with kids. And she heard me when I told her that story. And then soon thereafter, I was up at her ranch, working with young people, amongst them Angelina Jolie when she was a little 16-year
Oh,
old.
wow. What was she like?
Angie was a very reserved person. She was
Hmm.
very reserved, quite the smoldering young person. I never got a sense that she liked me. I never got a sense that she hated me. I never got a sense that she ever wanted to have anything to do with me, actually. She just, we were in the same circle. She didn't The kids at the camp could choose dance, they could choose drama, they could choose music, they can choose photography, they can choose visual arts. She never chose the drama, she chose the dance. And then I was the director of the shows that all of that brought it all together. So I would, in a sense, direct her dance numbers that Diana, the choreographer, created into a unified production. But she was just quiet with me, quiet. She seemed quiet, except with her friends, and very kind of reserved, shy, it seemed, but it's very smoldering, like something was going on in her life. And then John Voight, her father, would come up after, the kids were there for 2 week cycles. And after 2 weeks, the parents would come up and, some very famous people had their children there. John Voight would come up and he seemed like a loner himself. So she seemed a little bit like a loner. He seemed like a loner. Um, and so I mean, the rest of that story is that first summer that I was up there, I fell in love with the camp nurse. The camp nurse fell in love with me. She moved from Oregon down to the ranch. I moved from Westwood, where I lived, up to the ranch. So I lived there for 2.5 years or so on Jane's ranch, and worked the summers in between acting. Well, I actually worked the summers working with those kids. And when for those 6 to 7 weeks during the summer, I wouldn't take acting jobs. And I worked with the kids up there and I learned how to work with kids. I mean, that's where I learned because Jane gave me that invitation and I had a wonderful time working with young people and I learned how to work with young people. And after that, now which question am I answering? Jane Fonda. Jane
Hmm.
was, I'll tell you about Jane. Um, she, in my experience, was by far the most down to earth actor, celebrity, movie star that I've ever met. She was she was the way you and I are talking now. She was
I've always
just a
loved Jane.
just a down to earth, very real person. At the same time, she was the most this was the height of her workout period of her
Hmm.
life. The Jane
Hmm.
Fonda workout that she had all
Yeah.
these videotapes and stuff.
Hmm.
She used the Michael Jackson Theater. On Jane's Ranch in Santa Barbara, Michael Jackson donated to a theater, built a theater, which was like a recreation room that we called the theater. Um, she would, on not during the camp, so to speak, because during the 7 weeks of the camp, it was just camp life. But in after that, she would go up there and rehearse her workout videos. But she was what the word I'm fishing for is decisive. She's the most decisive person I've ever met in my life. Like if the camp director, David Hodges, would say, I think we need another bunk because for some reason, she'd say, oh, really? Okay, all right. So this happened, say, on a Saturday. This conversation would happen on a Saturday. On Monday, there'd be people surveying the area where this new bunk for the campers was going to be built. And within 2 weeks, the thing was built. She was like the most decisive decision maker. And, there was times where, people weren't working out at the ranch for some reason or other. She'd come in, have a talk about, next thing you know, this person would be gone. So she was the most down to earth person, but she was like seriously all business. When it came to getting things done and something wasn't working, she did something about it. But I'll give you a little interesting. This might blow your mind, Python.
Okay.
When I lived at the ranch for those 2.5 going on 3 years, Joe Cocker also lived on the ranch. Joe Cocker lived in what was called the Hill House. that
Hmm.
she that after Joe left, eventually she turned into a like a health spa. But that was interesting to hang out with Joe. That was really interesting. And I can't say much because Joe was like always stoned. I can't hear you for some reason,
Oh,
Python. I can't hear you.
wow.
Oh, now I can hear you. Now I can hear you. Maybe you were silently laughing.
Oh, yeah, I was silently laughing. Yeah, that was it.
Oh, that's what was it. So no, Jane was, and I again, she's another one who, when it was time for me to, when I was recruited to work at NYU in 2007, uh, the person that was bringing me in said, "Jose, you have to reach out to some people for some like really good recommendations." I named a few people, like when I worked with Al, his driver, Al Pacino's driver, was a young man who was like in his late teens or early 20s named Dean Devlin. I don't know if you know who Dean Devlin is, but he wrote Stargate. He
Okay.
wrote he wrote and co-produced Independence Day and on and on and on. So I said, well, there's Dean. I could probably get Dean to write me a letter. Oh, no, no, not big enough. He said, why don't you reach out to Al? I said, I'm not reaching out to Al. And then he started listing all these people that I'd worked with, like Jane. And I said, why are you making me do this, Bill? He said, well, because this NYU place, they really like the network. The network? They want they want to be associated with, the Hollywood network. So the reason I'm telling you this is that Jane, without hesitation, wrote me a letter as well. So she's just a real person, very, very down to earth, genuine individual.
Okay. Any stories of Jeff Bridges on that movie?
Who?
Jeff Bridges?
Oh, Jeff Bridges. Well, I never worked with him. We just, at our final rap party, I just rubbed shoulders with him, but I had
Okay.
no experience. I'm a fan of his work. He's such a good actor.
I love The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And everything he does, he's so good in it. But no, Jane, I have a very fond place in my heart for Jane.
I don't blame you. I got a couple other films I want to ask you about. One is Jumpin' Jack Flash with Whoopi Goldberg.
Um, you know, it's funny because Tommy Kovac, when he reached out to me and I asked him why me, and he said, well, I really like to find out about journeyman actors. So Jumping Jack Flash is another version of another journeyman actor gig that I had, which was how did I get cast in that? Okay, I auditioned for that, and Penny Marshall cast me um, as one of these three street thugs. And the most interesting part, by the way, by that time in my life and career, I was getting really tired of playing street thugs.
Yeah.
In fact, after the movie wrapped and they needed to do ADR, which is additional dialogue recording.
Mhm.
Do you know what ADR is?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Um, they had me and the other two thugs in to do ADR for harassing Whoopi Goldberg on the street. And I hated every minute of it. I mean, I just
Oh,
hated
I'm
every minute
sorry.
of it. I hated every minute of the ADR because
Hmm.
I'm going to track back to the working on the movie because there's some interesting things. But they wanted me to do all this like stereotypical street thug, street nigga shit, and I'm like, I I just don't want to be doing this. And Joel Silver, huge Hollywood producer, was standing behind me and and whispering you know, to Penny Marshall, like, the kinds of stuff weird shit that he wanted me to say. And I was just, I actually turned around and said, listen, if you wanted me to do something, like, talk to me. I mean, don't talk about me like I'm not here.
Hmm.
I mean,
I agree. I agree.
I was really not with playing those. Listen, no, no, listen. Uh, it's anyone's prerogative what they want to do. It's just that I was getting really tired
I don't blame you.
of those
Yeah.
kinds of things. Okay. So, but the interesting thing about it is that Barb Ernst, another one of those street thugs, and Whoopi were old friends. He got the role through Whoopi, and he got the role through Whoopi because they had done like street theater and guerrilla theater in San Francisco together. And I knew Bob Ernst because of my days in Vermont, where he was part of this company called Duck's Breath, which was this avant-garde weird theater company, like out of the '60s mold. And we both worked together, and so we spent, because he was so close to Whoopi, we spent a lot of time in Whoopi's trailer when we weren't shooting. And while Whoopi was just normal, very amicable, again, very, very pleasant, no bullshit person, she had Terry Southern. Do you know who Terry Southern is?
I know that name.
He's a screenwriter. I think he may have been one of the writers on Doctor Strangelove.
Ah, I love Dr. Strangelove.
She had Terry Southern and the composer, songwriter, superstar Harry Nielsen. Do you know who Harry Nielsen is?
Yeah.
He had both of those guys plastered on who knows how many different drugs and how much different alcohol in her trailer the night that I worked, the night or two that I worked, well, one of the nights that I worked, and they were pitching her a project that they wanted her to be in. And these two guys were hysterical. They were totally blitzed, totally outrageous. And I didn't know who they were. I mean, I knew that they were these two eccentric guys because they were totally eccentric, but I didn't know that they were the legendary Harry Nielsen and Terry Southern. I mean, that was wild. So that was the highlight of that, is hanging out with two legendary figures from Hollywood, absolutely plastered, and being outrageous, and watching Goldberg be both flattered and freaked out that they were so off the rails.
The last
That's
film I wanted to ask you about is Batteries Not Included. Now, I got a little story about this one. We haven't had drive-in theaters here since the mid 80s. My parents used to take my two brothers and I to the drive-in theater, uh, growing up. And, we saw like the Star Wars trilogy there. We saw like Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., movies like that. I remember Pete's Dragon was the first movie I recall, and I would have been 5 when I saw that. So it's amazing I remember that. But when our drive-ins shut down, and we never really went to the movie theaters. So the first movie we saw in an actual movie theater was Batteries Not Included.
really.
Yeah.
Now, how old were you when did you see that when it first came out?
Yeah, I would have been, that was 1987, so that was the year I turned 15.
That's amazing. So the first movie you saw in a theater was Batteries Not Included?
I wouldn't say it was the first movie. Back a few years prior, they had released The Smurfs and the Magic Flute in theaters. We did see that, but outside that, we were seeing everything at the drive-in theater. That's where we go, the drive-in. So when the drive-ins closed, and this was our option, Batteries Not Included was that first movie. And I remember my
Oh my
parents
goodness.
asked, yeah, my parents asked, how do you like seeing movies like this? Which was their way of saying we won't be able to do the drive-in anymore. Yeah.
That's funny. Boy, there's different perspectives I could talk about it from, because that one I did work on for quite some time, like 10 weeks or so, in and on and off for 10 weeks. Um, why don't you ask me some questions about it? Because if I could start talking about that one in a few different ways. How what do you want to know?
Oh my goodness, where can I start? Like, I mean, number one, it's always great when you get Hume Crone and I hope I pronounced his name right, and Jessica Tandy working together. What was that dynamic like working with?
That's a great place to start. They were they were like royalty of the theater and film. I mean, you have Hume Cronin, who, well, both of them. I mean, Jessica Tandy was like the original Blanche Dubois in Streetcar Named Desire with Marlon Brando, and Hume Cronin is a legend in his own ways in so many different, in both on stage and theater. Um, so they were just, and they were married. So they had kind of almost an unfair advantage because, well, a very fair advantage actually, because they played husband and wife. They were husband and wife, and they were masters of their craft. So just being on set with them and watching the way they work, their stillness, their relaxation with what they had to do, the way they communicated with the director was um was wonderful to watch. You know, they actually brought the best out of the director. They brought the best out of everybody else because they were so grounded and so real that um it was a lesson in how to participate on stage. And since the scenes that I were in took place, one of the scenes that I took place that I played in took place in a diner. By the way, I'm not thrilled with like my work in this movie, which is a whole other way that I can talk about this because remember I told you that I was like sick and tired of playing these
Yeah.
kind of people. My secret, well, my hook to play that role was that I wanted to get out of this life. That was my spine of my character because I was so sick and tired of playing these thugs that the way I played the role was I need to get out of this life. That was literally what I was acting. When I act, I always find a metaphor that is very closely that is very close a metaphor for a real problem that I'm working on in my life. And my problem was that I didn't like playing these roles. Even though I was cast in it, I didn't like playing these roles. So that was what was going on with me. And I don't know that it was very good for the movie because the movie was kind of a light, it was a very light
Yeah.
movie.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the highlights, especially since you asked about Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy, is that when we would not when they were setting up the shots, the lighting and setting up the shots for the scenes that I was in, um, the first time I did that, I sat down with Hume as if we were in a diner together, just him and I, we're shooting the shit. And, he asked me about myself and, you know, kind of the kind of questions you're asking me.
Mhm.
And my first response to him was, and I guess it was because I was yearning for those days again. I said, well, I've actually, before becoming, a professional, most of the acting that I'd done was in Shakespeare, at the Champlain Shakespeare Festival in Vermont, because I was an apprentice there for 2 summers. And then as the thoughts were leaving my mind, or leaving as the thoughts were leaving my mouth, I thought to myself, I'm talking to Hume Cronin, like who is like legendary Shakespeare actor. And I think I even said that to him. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cronin. I mean, because I think I said something like, I think most of my experience acting is actually in Shakespeare." And I didn't finish the thought, and I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Cronin, but I realized who I'm talking to." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that, Jose." So we just talked, we talked about Shakespeare, and we talked about, being an actor and in New York. And he had some experience with working with someone who directed me a few times. And one, did he direct a Mamet play? No, he never directed me in a Mamet play, but I did. I was in Romeo and Juliet at the Long Wharf Theater in New York, where a gentleman named Arvin Brown was the artistic director, and he'd worked with Arvin. And so we just down to earth talked like person to person. And he was just a lovely person. I didn't talk much with or have very much to do with um Jessica, because she was kind of in her own world, because
Mhm.
her character was in her own world,
Mhm.
Um, and I did become friends with another cast member, the woman who played the young lady in the movie. She died too young. Elizabeth Pena, who played the young
Oh,
pregnant woman in the movie.
yes. Yes.
We became friends. So, but my role was as one of these thugs, and there's nothing um, exciting about playing these thug roles at all. In
Was
fact, it was like playing a double thug, because during the shooting of Batteries Not Included, I was sent by my agent to audition for a role in on Hill Street Blues,
Mhm.
where I played another thug, but it was a very extended. I was in the entire episode, like kidnapping the lead attorney lady in the show for the entire show. And the only reason I'm mentioning it is that I had to beg the producer of Batteries Not Included to give me a week off to shoot Batteries Not Included. I mean, Hill Street Blues, and I had the same haircut in both things. In Hill Street Blues, it was a huge part, which is why I said, please let me do it. It was a very big part for the entire episode. I'm terrorizing everybody. And I kind of enjoyed that for some reason, because
Mhm.
it was such a meaty role where I got to terrorize. It was, do you know the movie Dog Day Afternoon?
Yes, I do. Al Pacino.
When Al Pacino's like, holed up in this bank and he's screaming to the street, Attica, Attica. Well, it was that kind of a role where I take over the whole episode because I kidnapped, the chief of police's wife, who's the prosecutor. Had the same haircut. Um, that was probably the most exciting part of my experience of Batteries Not Included, actually, is the week off that I got to take off and do Hill Street Blues, because that was a great role. And that you're actually asking me about these roles, and it was around that time that I realized that the way Hollywood was shaping up and the kinds of things that I was constantly being asked to do was colliding with my dream that I talked about in the beginning. Um, And when I would show, I had a habit of showing the things that I did during the year to the kids that I worked with at Jane's Ranch. One little girl named Casey nudged me and said, Jose, why do you always play these bad guys in the movies? And I didn't have the heart to like break it to her that, those are the kinds of roles that people like me are constantly being asked to play. So I didn't say that to her, but that stuck with me. And I went to my agent and I said, I need to start playing. I need you to start sending me out for roles that are like, more in alignment with like my ideals. These kinds of things are just they don't really align with what I want to be about or what my life
Yeah.
wants to be about. You know, I, and I just started getting very tired of all the violence in movies and me participating in it. So I went to a manager, a great manager in the business, um, and they were interested in representing me, and I was interested in working with them because I had a great agent. And the first thing the manager said to me was, so this is part of the batteries not included thing because this is like this and the Hill Street Blues gig were like the straws that broke the camel's back in some ways. And I went to this manager, and the manager said, "So, what kind of things do you want to do, Jose?" Same question that my agents asked me when I first moved to Hollywood. The manager said, what are you not being sent up for that you'd like to be sent up for? And after a huge pause, I said, well, where do we start? Every role whose name is Julio or Pablo or Juan or Jose, and that usually is either some servant or some thug, pimp, mugger, or junkie, I get sent up for. But there's all kinds of roles that I could play that I'm never considered for. And we met that meeting, and then we had another meeting. And then on the third meeting, we were both kind of on the same page because they were wondering, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to work together or not?
Hmm.
And I thought about it before the third meeting, and I said, well, um, and this is something that Spacey and I very much have in common. I said, if you can help me get better material, then there's probably a reason to work together. But that's because that's what I need to be sent out for is better material. And this manager said something tremendously wise, but tremendously disappointing. They said, well, Jose, if you want to do quality material, you're not going to work a lot because everybody wants to do quality material and there's not a lot of quality material out there. The people who work a lot, who work regularly, are people who do the material that they're right for in some way that they want to do. And oftentimes it's not great material, but they make the material look better because they're in it, which is what you've been doing. And then every once in a while, every once in a blue moon, they get to do something that they really want to do. So a life of the working professional in this business is basically suffering the fools, making material look better because you're in it, and then every once in a while doing something you really want to do. And that was like the best piece of professional advice I ever got because it's the truth. And you can look at everybody's career that's like that. And I didn't, you know, that didn't align with the way I wanted to live my life. So I stayed in Santa Barbara and dedicated myself to working with Camp Laurel Springs was folding after Jane Fonda and Tom Hayden went their separate ways, and and Jane's children were no longer camp age. Um, I stayed in Santa Barbara and helped found a nonprofit to work with at-risk teenagers, um, called City at Peace, that really helped a lot of young people's lives. So that's my story.
I have a question. Speaking, you mentioned Jane's children. She was the aunt, of course, of Bridget Fonda. Was she part of that camp?
No, no,
No,
no.
okay.
Bridget Fonda was not part of that camp.
Okay.
No.
No, I was just curious. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. You know, I hear you when it comes to the whole typecasting and stuff. I'm one of these people. I delight in seeing actors play against type. It's always amazing. And sometimes, you get an actor that plays the same thing. It's funny for the first two or three times. I'll give you an example, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey had a three-hit punch in 1994 with Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. I still love Dumb and Dumber a lot. Not that I don't like the other two, but Dumb and Dumber's personal. But when he did, Cable Guy, it died down a bit at the box office. And
Hmm.
finally, he gets to do The Truman Show.
Oh,
And
that was great.
yeah, and then Man on the Moon and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's like, oh my goodness, let's look at this side of Jim Carrey. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
seeing actors, or even like Harrison Ford. We've seen him play the heroic roles. Then you see him in What Lies Beneath, where he plays a villain, and it's like, wow, this was something different. How did this come about? I love seeing actors play against type because it gives you they either make it or they don't. And more often than not, they make it because it's like they're getting to show what else they can do. And I love that. I'm right now wearing an all over Emma Stone shirt, which is, she's my favorite working actor right now. I love Emma
You know
Stone because,
what's really weird is when you sometimes when you do certain things, like when you just stood up there when you were showing,
hmm
the screen got all like,
I know,
what is
because I
that?
got that, because I got the background, Toronto background, you know?
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah.
It blends into the, yeah, right.
But Emma Stone,
She's
I've been a
terrific.
f- I've been a fan of hers since Superbad in 2007, and I'll go to a movie just to see her because she's got little quirks that are familiar, yes, about her personality, but she always seems to like get a little different, a little different, a little different. I'm not surprised she's won two Oscars, and I'm hoping she becomes one
She's
of the
such
ones
a
to
good
win more.
actress.
I absolutely am mesmerized by her.
She's an
And
amazing actress.
mm, yeah. So I love seeing actors like that are able to do that. And you
Yeah,
mentioned, getting tired of playing the thug. I don't blame you because you want to be
yeah,
challenged as an actor. You want to be challenged.
absolutely. Absolutely want to be challenged, and it gets boring. It gets
hmm
boring, and it doesn't represent all that I can be. I
hmm
mean, I didn't I entered, the acting profession to be a variety of things, not just to be one thing. And
hmm
especially if those one things are constantly representing um people of color in such a negative light. Now
Yeah.
things have changed somewhat, but when I said no more to this, um, that's what was going on, and I didn't want any part of that. But but here's the thing: is that I didn't leave St. Croix with that inner mission or go to work at Jane's Ranch over those summers because I did turn down acting jobs when I was working at the ranch. Um, and I didn't stay in Santa Barbara to do what I eventually did. Um, for any other reason that's what I really wanted to do. That was more in alignment with my dream than even being an actor, period. Because there's another dimension of being an actor that I balk at, even if it wasn't about playing stereotypical roles. It has to do with to be a professional actor, whether you're a big star or a journeyman, which is basically what I was. Um, you have to rely on others to determine when you get to do what you do best.
Yeah.
And that's true for Tom Cruise, and that's true for some unknown actor that's just getting their start. Now, they get paid a lot more money to give up that freedom of choice, but that's one thing that I learned from working with very big stars like Al or like Jane Fonda or even Madonna or I hate to keep going on and on about names, but just think about them. There's a lot of I was just talking about this the other day with my wife that you take musical superstars that have gigantic followings
Hmm.
that dip their toe in becoming professional, becoming actors, and they don't hang around very much. Cher didn't hang around very much. Sting didn't hang around very long. Phil Collins didn't hang around pretty long. John Bon Jovi couldn't get to first base with becoming a well-known actor. It's because they have so much agency as musicians to work and create whenever they want. But if you're a professional actor, you're basically spending your life waiting for people to let you do what it is that you do best. And I'm not wired for that. So my working with, mentoring young people, especially who are at risk, because I was one of these at-risk kids when I was a kid, and some adult yanked me in a room and put a script in my hand and said, "Here, do this." Um, mentoring kids to learn how to express themselves and resolve the conflicts of their lives using drama is what my work had been in Santa Barbara for a number of years. That's that's my dream, and that's why I love teaching today because I get with young people who want to say something important and use whatever I know to help them do it. So it wasn't like I've ever looked back at, I get asked to be in projects, and I generally always say, not generally now at this point, I always say no because I lost my love for being on hold for someone else to decide when I get to create. I mean, if you're an artist, a creative person, you can create whenever you want. So that's the full circle of it all that I found how to use my love of drama, my insights into making drama um, to help other people either grow, live a healthy life, or to make beautiful things. I don't know if you saw my bio on USC, but you know, three of my just a few years ago, three of my former students that were all in the same class, you
I
know,
saw that.
won
Yes.
won gigantic awards. Like I think they
Hmm.
together they were nominated for like 13 Academy Awards, and
I did see
and
that. Yes, I did.
Chloe obviously won those awards, and Shaka's actors won. And I get a lot of joy out of just working in, Stanislavski had a famous thing: love the art in you, not you in the art. So I love using the art in me to pass it on to other people.
Well, you know what? It's been wonderful having you come on here and talk to me. A special shout out to Tommy Kovac because he was absolutely right. You were a delightful interview. This has been so insightful. I go in this and I make some preparations about what films I want to ask about, and you told excellent accounts of before you got into the business and your early takes on it and the roles. And I loved how you come into your criticisms on parts of your career because a lot of artists they'll avoid that, and they won't get into that. But I love the fact that you come out and like, this is something that went on and didn't sit well with me, and that you have a passion of working with young people, And I loved your
Mhm.
James Fonda stories. It's fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
Jane, what a character she is. She's real.
I meant to ask you, what was Al Pacino like? Because you spoke highly of him.
Um, Al was a, a tremendous joy to work with. I was the way it came about is that David Mamet recommended me for this production of American Buffalo
Hmm.
that was going to open at the Lone Wharf Theater in, oh, that's when I worked with Arvin Brown on American Buffalo. That was going to open at the Lone Wharf Theater before moving to off Broadway. And I mean, I'm talking, this is right around Prince of the City time, like my very first days as a young actor. This was like right after David saw me in Rebel Without a Cause. He set up an audition for me for American Buffalo, and um, I'll give you soup to nuts on this one. When I was told that I would be auditioning for American Buffalo and that the audition would be with Al, this was before the internet. This was before social media. This was when Al was like a legitimate big time superstar. And in movies that I adored, even before I dreamt of being an actor, it was shocking. It was truly shocking that I would have to go into a room and act with Al Pacino. Forget auditioning. Just because when you go to play, when you go to audition for a part, you can't fawn over the other actors. You can't, I wasn't ready to go in and um act with, no less meet this huge star. And so what can I say about Al is that he was a totally generous, professional person that the director sat there, Al sat right in front, I sat down opposite him, and we just read the role back and forth. And it was all acting. And I guess he liked it enough that I kept being called back. And over a weekend, it was between myself and two other actors, and another actor got the role, an actor who actually had acted with Al before in a movie called Injustice for All. So they did the production in New Haven, Connecticut for a month and a half or so. And when they moved it down to New York, they asked me to be understudy for the Bobby role in this production. And I, of course, said yes. Um, and so I was able to, oh, this is a really great thing that very few people know about. That Actors Equity, the union that handles stage actors,
Hmm.
has a rule that an actor has to be at the theater at half hour, 7:30.
Hmm.
The curtain is at 8. The actors have to be there at 7:30. That's that's what your obligation is. That's an Actors Equity contract.
Hmm.
Al requested that the entire cast rehearse every day starting say at 5:30 till 7:30. Now, it was only a three character play. Al was one of them, and two other characters, the character of Donnie, the character of Bobby. And I was understudying the character of Bobby. And for me, I this was like a dying and going to heaven experience because I got to sit in on rehearsals
Hmm.
of the great Al Pacino rehearsing a play that was already sold out well in advance with two other actors. And I was like a fly on the wall. So it was me watching everything that I'd learned at the neighborhood playhouse from Sandy Meisner and everything I'd learned from Stella Adler. And I also worked with another wonderful woman named Mira Rostova, who was Montgomery Clift's coach. Um, I got to see all that stuff happen, all that education that I had gotten applied to bringing a show that was already in good shape to the next level, like to really come alive on a day-to-day basis. In my fellow understudy for the Donnie role, there was no understudy for Al, but the understudy for Donnie role was like, I'm not, I'm not going to do that. I mean, he was like an old-time Broadway actor. He said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show up at 7:30. And I said, that's okay, Teddy. That's perfectly fine with me, but I'm going to be there. He thought it was absurd that we should have to do that. And then there were some actors in the city that were saying, so I hear that Al's having you all do all this method shit, right? I said, what, excuse me? Well, this, rehearsing every day, at 5:30, you don't have to be there at 7:30. I said, hold on a second now. This is like the best thing that's ever happened to me in my career. To be able to rehearse or be part of rehearsals every single day without, are you crazy? This is like dying and going to heaven. This was amazing. This was like immersing me in all of the stuff that I wanted to learn and be good at and watching them. And the way it worked is that they took the play from the very beginning of the play and found and essentialized every fact of the given circumstances of the world. So if the play said, opens up with Donnie giving, you know, Bobby a hard time because he was supposed to stake out these people that they were supposed to rob. That's what the play says. But they started talking about the things that they would nail down was like, well, how many blocks away is this place? And what time were you supposed to be there, but then weren't there? I mean, these facts were all shared in common with the cast so that they were all in the same world. Like their world that they were creating about the facts that given circumstances of the world were as concrete as you're there and I'm here and you're wearing that and I'm wearing this and there's a backdrop that you have they just nail down all of the given circumstances of the world so that parts of the play that um were working quite well all of a sudden came in like sharp focus, like like everything was just more hyper focused and more hyper real, not because they were trying to be real, it's just because they nailed down the concrete facts of the world that they would know if they were real people. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they did that from the beginning of the play to the end of the play. And I got to witness how doing that wouldn't necessarily yield immediately fabulous results. But after a couple of days or a week, you'd see that section of the play that they worked on that way, you know, to hone down to the the facts just explode with life. Like there's a big thing in the play that they talk about characters that aren't on stage. There's a character named Fletcher who is a constant presence in their conversation, and then there's these two characters, Grace and Ruthie, that Al Pacino's character is pissed off at top of the play. Well, they nailed down the facts of like, well, why is why is Al's character so pissed off at Grace and Ruthie all the time? Sure, as an actor, you got lines that is cursing them out. Fill that up with you can fill that up with your acting technique, you know. But when they start saying, well, you know, all these particulars about Grace and Ruthie, like that they're always talking behind Teach's back. You know, they're always talking about their back behind his back, and they hang out together, and he does favors for them. They never return the favor and all this stuff. You know, and Fletcher's always trying to get in on a job that someone else is doing. So when they talk about these people, they're talking about their common knowledge about these people that they share on stage. And it's no longer just lines, and it's no longer, um, you know, individual actors making choices. They're making choices that are grounded in a common knowledge that they have that's very specific. And I lived that for a year in that production as understudy. And then I was also invited to do some improvisations with them and stuff. So that's about the work. Socially, it was really interesting because, you know, Al's a very generous guy, and we'd spend time at his home, and you know, whenever he threw parties, like every superstar in the business that lived in New York would be there. And it all segued into me when this is another long story, which I'm not going to bore you with, but you know, when I was working on it, um, Scarface came into the picture, and I'm Cuban, and I very much wanted to be in that movie, but a long story, which was not meant to be after like 8 or 9 auditions. It didn't work out that I got the role that I wanted, but I helped Al prepare for the role. And I have one more story about it that's really delicious if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Did you just say something?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear you that first time.
Oh, okay.
Um, During the course of my auditioning for the role and realizing that I wasn't going to get it, um, I was still helping Al prepare for the role, and I said to him early on, you know, that I knew a person that was a real life Scarface character. Are you hearing noise in the background of my talking?
No, I'm not at all.
Oh, good. Okay. So, I said I have a friend, a childhood friend, who's like the real deal. You want to meet him? And he said, sure, sure, sure. You know, we're going to have a party up at the place um, in a couple of weeks. You can, you know, invite him. So I have this friend named Pedro that I grew up with, who's a criminal, a really, you know, heroin addict criminal person, scar on his face, the whole deal. And I wasn't that thrilled with the way the casting of the role went down, and the role that I wanted went down and everything. So I wasn't being vindictive. I was actually killing two birds with one stone. I was introducing Al to the real deal with a bit of a twist because I mean this guy was a loose cannon. He's really like Tony Montana. He's a crazy man. So inviting him up to Al's mansion um, was an interesting experience. So anyway, I sent him up. You know, we went to this party. He came with me, and we're talking about all the luminaries of show business. Carly Simon singing "You're So Vain" at the piano, and you know Christopher Walken and Diane Keaton, and all these people are at this party, right? And about 45 minutes into this party, um, Jimmy, Al's security guy, taps me on the shoulder and says, follow me. And I'm like, what's going on? So I follow Jimmy into Al's bedroom, and I'm at the door of the bedroom. Jimmy's standing here to my left. Al is standing in that corner of the bedroom to my left. This other guy, a security guy named Lou, we I nicknamed him Lou Diamond. He was a character. He was standing to my right. And in that corner over there is Pedro with his pockets turned inside out because they caught Pedro pilfering, rummaging through Al's drawers to steal from Al. I said, "Hey guys, I mean, you wanted to meet the real deal. That's the real deal." So they caught my friend Pedro. He wanted to meet like a real Scarface figure, which Pedro was, and he was uh he was burglarizing Al's apartment at the height of like this exclusive party at Al's place. So I leave you with that story.
Well, Jose, it was wonderful having you come on here today. This was absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed having you on here, and this was incredible. And when this is ready, I'll send it to you so you can put it out there. Before I let you go, um,
Mm.
first off, do you have like a web page or anything that you want to promote on here so people can find you?
At the moment, there's my website
Hmm.
that you may have already even looked at. It's
Yes, it is.
it's
Yeah.
really it's a little out of date. Eventually I'm putting together a product that's based on all of the lessons I taught my Academy Award nominated and winning students. It's called the Director's Palette.
Hmm.
When when that's ready, I can send you whatever information I have about it your way. But for
Sure.
now, I will remain keeping a low profile.
Sure.
But the director's palette's it's on its way, and it's basically a question-based approach to preparing to make a movie. It's actually based on a quote that Sidney Pollack shared with me when
Mhm.
we were shooting a documentary about Sandy Meisner. Man, I have so many war stories. I'm not boring you to death. I mean, my
No.
wife is like 6 feet away from me here. She's heard all these war stories already. I'm afraid of boring her as I'm telling you. Um, uh, so anyway, the point is, we're shooting a documentary about Sandy Meisner. I don't know if you've seen it. It's extraordinary. I'm in it from beginning to end. I'll send you a link to it. It's on YouTube.
Hmm.
Um, and during a break, I said to Sidney, um, so because he was a student of Sandy Meisner's as well, I said, "What did you learn from Sandy?" And he said, "I learned to ask questions." He said, "Questions are a director's palette." I said, "Wow." That came and went. I never thought of that again until recently when I was asked to teach at USC and I needed to give them a curriculum that was robust and really prepared them to make films. And they had no experience. On the first day of class, I said to them, you who have very little, if any, experience making films, and Steven Spielberg have something in common. They said, "What's that?" I said, "You and Steven Spielberg have to ask the same exact questions to make a movie." And that kind of blew their minds. And I put together a thing called the director's palette, which is asking the essential questions that you need to prepare for a motion picture. And it's been working really well. So I'm putting it together and I'm going to offer it probably as a workshop sometime and also as a book, and maybe even an online educational module. So that's you're a great listener, Mr. Python. You're a great listener, and I you make me not feel self-conscious about telling you all these war stories because I'm filled with like the minutia of all this stuff.
Well, you know what? The honor is all mine to have you come on here, and this has been a thrill, you know. I was going to say before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Doing a plug for what?
My show.
Sure. How do I do that?
Just state your name and say you've been listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. Actually, if you want to state your name and say we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of Desperately Seeking Susan, and then say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Okay, so we could do number. If I don't get it right the first time, we
Oh,
could do number of takes,
I've
right?
had so many people do it on several takes, so don't feel
Oh,
centered
great.
out there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to. So this is Jose Angel Santana. I have had a an incredibly beautiful time with Greg Gilbert on, see, I forget. What's
Python's Paradise.
what
Uh,
Python's Paradise?
yep.
Okay. This is Jose Santana having a wonderful time achieving mutual understanding with Greg Gilbert's Python's Paradise.
Absolutely, folks. Yes. Check out his website, check out his films, celebrate Desperately Seeking Susan, 40 years old, which is amazing because the entire cast is only 39. So I don't know how they pulled that off, you know?
Yes, 40th anniversary of Death 40th anniversary. This is the 40th anniversary celebration of Desperately Seeking Susan. It's been a pleasure talking with the one and only Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. It's been an honor
Absolutely.
and a pleasure and a complete total delight. Stay tuned.
Absolutely. And of course, that was a great year for Rosanna Arquette, also After Hours. So, yeah. So, have pleasure meeting her at Chiller. You ever get to do the cons, the
No,
conventions?
I've never been to Cannes. No,
Oh, they're fun. They're a
but we're
lot of
going to be
fun.
going there. My wife is writing a tremendous movie that we're going to shoot for attending Cannes to screen it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when that's ready, I should have the two of you come on here and talk about it.
That would be awesome. It's very timely. I can't tell you its name. Can I say the
Hmm.
name? Oh, the movie's called Luneta,
Hmm.
and it's about what's going on in the zeitgeist today in North America and the world. And yes, when it's ready to go, we're happy to be back.
I'm happy to have you come back. Anyway, I wish you a wonderful day. And I appreciate it. And when this is ready, I will definitely send it out to you, and you can post it wherever you please.
I really appreciate it. It's really a pleasure meeting you. I'm sorry that this is our only encounter. Maybe we'll have more for Luneta, And
Sure.
but you're a pleasure to spend time with.
Well, I appreciate Tommy Kovac for like he he he, uh he does a lot more of these than I do because I'm like working two jobs, so I don't get to do it as much. But he throws a lot of guest ideas, and he sends guest ideas to me of people he knows that are going to work with me. So there won't be trouble, and he said they'll be most interesting. So your name was one of them. So
Thank you. You're wonderful yourself.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Anyway, God bless you. You have a wonderful day.
You too. It's been a real pleasure to be here on Greg Gilbert's
Python's
Python's
Paradise.
Paradiso. Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.